So here's the scenario. You have a client that wants a very large 3D rendered image. I'm talking an image that is at least 10,000 pixels on one side, which calculates out to about 77 megapixels. You spend days, weeks working on this image. You kick off the render. It's going to take like 4 days, 7 days for this thing to complete. Halfway through, your computer crashes, the render stops, you lose everything, you miss your deadline, your client is angry. It's a very bad day. So, using this method, we can break the image down into tiles and make steady progress. Even if the power goes out, you only lose a quarter or an eighth of your image, not the entire thing. So anyway, I have my project here that I've spent weeks working on, and I am going to set up my render settings in here, just standard like you would for a regular render. And the command we are going to use is this right here. And we are going to type this into the Maya command line. And to get to that, I'm going to open up my applications folder here and go to my Maya installation folder and open up Maya terminal. And it gives me this window here, and I'm going to navigate to my project folder, which incidentally I have set up on my desktop with a proper Maya project structure. And my scenes are in here. I have any of my textures and everything right there. And it's worth noting too, I believe that this requires that you have your project set up properly within Maya. So if I go to open scene, my current project is set to this sphere project, sphere render folder, because this command is smart enough to be able to read those folders, as you'll see in a minute here. So I opened up that terminal. I am going to navigate to my project directory. So get to the desktop, render, and scenes. And then here there's my scene file. And I'm going to use the render command as we saw in this. And then I am going to use the -R switch in order to use the mental ray renderer, MR, and I'm going to set the verbosity of this command to 5, which means it's going to give me a ton of data spitting out here, and which includes a percentage, so you can see how it makes sure that your render is still moving forward, nothing's crashed or gone crazy. And the next thing I'm going to set is my dimensions on the x-axis, which in this case I'll just set to a standard high definition. On your project, of course, it's going to be much higher. And the y-axis, high definition. And this next part is a little counterintuitive. There's a total of 4 numbers. The first 2 numbers define the dimensions on the x-axis. The next 2 numbers define the dimensions on the y-axis. So I have a little diagram here set up to help explain that. So the first 2 numbers are going to define that we want to render from 0 to 480 pixels. The second to define on the y-axis, we want to render from 0 to 1080 pixels. And therefore it's going to render this red region. And then when we move on to the next tile, we define 480 to 960 and 0 to 1080. So for this, since this is our first tile, I'll go 0 to 480, 0, 1080. Which I believe is right, yes. And next step is to define where we want it to spit out the images using the RD switch. And as I mentioned before, this is smart enough to know to detect your project folder structure. So all I have to do is type in images, and it is going to automatically spit out these images in the images folder. And the next switch, I am going to name our image. Make sure to use proper syntax. And I do not need an extension on this, so I'll just do tile01. And according to my render settings I set up in Maya, it will add the proper file extension on there. And the next thing, we don't need a switch for it, we just define the project name, which is sphere_1.ma. One more note before we kick off this render. I'm going to, well, a couple more notes actually. If you are using Final Gather in your project, you're going to have to pre-compute that because you'll get ugly lines between your tiles if you do that. I did not use Final Gather on my project. I used this GI prototype, which is new in 2015 or 2016 of Maya. I didn't have to pre-compute anything, and the image fit together perfectly, so you should be fine using the GI prototype. But I will post a link in the description, more information from Zap, who's the mental ray guru, about doing that voodoo with Final Gather. Also, just a quick note about how I'm rendering this out. I am putting it into OpenEXR format, and this does include passes, and the passes are split according to that region as well. So I have all my passes picked out here, and other options, whatnot. So I am going to save this and close Maya. My command is all set up, and just hit enter. And it's going to open up a Maya process. It's going to load my plugins. There, you see it gives you the percentage that's done, and bam, it just spit out a tile with a little sliver of my sphere on there. And then I'm just going to hit the up arrow here in order to do my next tile. And we're going to define this region as 480 to 960. And do not forget to rename your file, otherwise it's just going to overwrite your first one. And hit enter again, and then check that out. Bam, it rendered out another sliver. And you can break this down into as many slivers as you want, of course. You could do 8, 12, whatever. Next will be 1440 according to our diagram here, 960 to 1440. And yeah, it does this sometimes, upload payloads successfully right in the middle of the command. It's very annoying, so I'm just going to clear that out and try again. I'm just using up and down arrows to switch commands. And rename tile 3, we have the right dimensions. Get rid of that space and enter. And then the last tile, tile 4, we're going to go 1440 to 1920. Enter. Okay. Thought I forgot to rename it there for a second. And there's tile 4, lightning fast. So we don't need this window anymore. Close that out. You have all your images here in their glory. I'm just going to open all of those with Photoshop. Like so. And you'll see that, to a more visible one, all my passes came through here. If there was actual lighting in the scene, there would be actual data there as opposed to just black. So I am going to bring all of these into one image. And voila! We have the complete sphere, and it's still split into slices, of course. And you'll see there are no seams. whatsoever. And you can merge the layers, continue editing as usual. Hope that was helpful. Happy rendering.